Okay, hi everybody. My name is Zach. I'm with Four Kitchens. I'm a designer and front-end developer there. I specialize in making things look pretty, but none of my demos look pretty. They all look terrible, but it's for good reason, I promise. How many of you in here are designers? That's a medium to healthy number. How many of you are developers or consider yourself developers? Now, is that front-end developers versus back-end developers? Front-end? A little bit of both. Back-end? A little bit of both. All right, well, that'll work. Basically, what I'm going to be talking to you guys today about is the idea of how to design sites that are future-proof. There's a great notion in the Drupal community about how content needs to be kept sacred, and that, basically the aesthetics of the site can change based on, the whims of web style and, your clients. They might say, oh, I don't like that green anymore, make it red, make it taller. Whatever those trends are, they shouldn't affect content. But we have this new variable in play, and devices is what I'm going to be talking about. And unfortunately, Apple beat me to the punch. Steve Jobs is up there talking about the iCloud, and he's basically saying that now, your laptop, your cell phone, which most of you probably have smartphones, they're all basically the same thing. Pretty soon your television will have that same level of integration if it doesn't already. I know there's Google TVs out there, so for some of you lucky people who don't have to do anything but pick up a keyboard when you go home, I envy you. So basically I'm going to be talking about our building blocks. So design, originally the web, all the metaphors for web design come from the print world, and for obvious reasons. That was our first kind of medium that we got to transmit information in rapid production and spread it out everywhere. And it was designed with a very specific task. You've got the dimension of the material you have to print on, and you have so many words to deliver to people, and so much ink, etc., etc. There were very specific constraints. And then when we got to the web, that same mentality kind of came over. When we talk about a website, we say things like web pages as if they were finite dimensional things, as if they're always going to be, this basically vertical, long scrolling sheet of paper. And typically we organize content that way also. We really just stick to the metaphor of print. And I'm not saying that is, going to cause us any ruin, but we've got something new now. We have multiple devices basically that can all perform the same way, and you can get to information. You can basically recycle information but display it in different ways because of these new devices. So what I'm talking about is browser synergy. And this is all very recent. So within a few short months, we've gone from seeing people experiment with CSS3, and I'm sorry if I didn't preface what I was about to jump into with. I'm going to be talking about media queries and CSS3 and why that's important, and why this is kind of the tool that I've gone with, and there's lots of different implementations. We're going to be going over some things about adaptive and responsive designs and what those words mean. There are a lot of buzzwords, and I'm going to try and give you what I feel like is kind of the best way to go through with things. So if you follow any web publications, you've seen people start to really push CSS3-based media queries to change layouts. And that's really cool because it's very flexible, it's very lightweight. A lot of browsers are compliant with it, and if they aren't, you can usually use a JS shim to get it to do what you want it to do. And for us, when we're going into the future, if we want this total amalgam of a web experience where everybody kind of gets the same thing, you're going to have to start planning on making websites with no CSS media queries first, as in the first part of your design or your content organization or your strategy is to think about those basically millions of people out there who don't have an awesome smart device, but they have a very capable web browser. They have limited bandwidth, but they may not have all the bells and whistles that, like our iPhones do or our Android devices. So let's talk about buzzwords. There's adaptive, responsive, fluid, flexible, and some of them make use of media queries or JavaScript to change any aspect of the appearance on the website. And this is like the language, and to me all these words are kind of synonymous. Like they're basically trying to accomplish the same things. There is I don't know how many people in here know who Nathan Smith is and 960GS. He recently wrote a JavaScript plugin called adapt.js, and if you haven't seen it, it's worth checking out. And what it does basically is that without CSS media queries, you can use JavaScript to basically say, all right, when JavaScript says that the screen is this dimension, pull in this style sheet. So it's doing the same sort of thing, but instead of having a fluid transition in one sheet, it's using JavaScript to pull those things in. And that is actually kind of a good solution for older browsers that can't deal with media queries but can still fire JavaScript. So you don't have to worry about some legacy browser issues that might exist. Yes, ma'am?
What is a media query?
I will actually be answering your question. Media query is basically a simple line of CSS that detects something about the device, and specifically we're going to be looking at the dimensions of the device. There are things that are becoming more interesting about media queries, like people are trying to really write them to target specific devices instead of just screen widths, but I'll get into that in a second. So this idea of fluid design is actually kind of an old thing. Like when I was first doing web design, there was a very specific division in how we should be doing things. And we had 800 by 600 screens, and 1024 had just come out. We're like, yeah, there's all this space. So there was kind of a division with the guys that I hung out with. They said, half of them are like, you know what, we need to be building sites that have fluid layouts, with tables or divs or whatever it was. Set everything 100%, use percentages, use M's. Don't use fixed width because this isn't sustainable. And the rest of us were like, yeah, that's cute and everything, but I got more space, and I flatly don't care about people with older monitors. They're going to throw those away. You know what I mean? Like it's only going to get bigger, right? Never smaller. So I was this guy with the beret. I'm like, no, I'm I'm the art snob. I want things to be this way. I want this control. I know what's best. I can see the future, and the future says that I know best. But I was totally wrong. I mean, how many times have you been wrong about the curve of technology, right? So if browser windows aren't just getting bigger, what do they look like? What do your new canvases basically look like? And yes, shame me for using only Apple products here in the diagram, but my point is that they look like a lot of things. All these devices are basically capable of displaying the exact same website. They can have the same images, the same JavaScript, the same web fonts. They're just different widths. And the cool thing about that is that, at least for us in the Western world, we have, pretty good bandwidth. All you lucky people with T-Mobile got 4G for the last year before us crappy AT&T owners get it. We've been very, fortunate to be able to have that kind of experience. So it's not just about the size. The size is important, and this is where the conversation kind of changes into if you're going to be using media queries and start thinking about your content and your layouts as being flexible and moving your information around, you want to think about browser compatibility. And luckily, we're starting to see the software developers go. They're the ones who are influencing the new standards, basically. I mean, Google's basically funded half of HTML5, so we have it because they totally support it, and so does Apple. So browser developers are basically doing a great job of starting to support all these features. So if you're worried about things like, oh well, this you know, like Firefox 3.6 or something like that may not be working. It's not really that big of a deal. A lot of them are going backwards and patching their older work. Now that's not true for our big blue friends. They consistently don't care, but there's ways to work around that. So what do the sizes look like? And there's a bunch of links, and I have these slides posted on the notes for this particular session. But all these are metrics that were gathered from different websites, and there's a whole bunch of different people that I source for information. So please don't ever think that I came up with this all by myself, because I didn't. So these are the screen size ranges that are the most dominant in our industry right now. So there's a 320, which is the average smartphone portrait display, 480, 768 for the portrait of most tablet devices, and a lot of them can be flopped to landscape, and they get 1024, which is really cool. And then that also includes desktop and higher. So that's what you've got to play with. Like those are your primary target zones for reorganizing your content. Yes, sir.
So big, large HD TVs, they're also coloring.
No, those can range. So there's a difference between pixel depth and pixel size, and right now I don't have all my awesome notes to tell you which is which, but like. I don't know, does anybody in here have an HD TV that's 30 inches or yeah, 10. Yeah, but that's there's two layers to that. So there's the pixel density in terms of per inch, and then there's the actual like resolution of the device itself. So like for instance, the newer iPhones are high. They have the high definition display. Even though the physical space is basically still the 320, it has double the pixel density, so you can have really, really sharp images, blah, 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 blah. So what we're really after with media queries is figuring out how big the canvas is, not necessarily how deep the pixel depth is. How deep the pixel depth is, yes. Most of this is, 320, 40, and 768 are I don't know what the aspect ratio is, but it would be like basically the portrait views of like an iPhone, Android, or tablet, or basically it's taller than it is wide, and then from 1024 and up, it flops. I can't tell you exactly what those dimensions are. There is actually a function in media queries that lets you say, is this landscape, is this portrait, and if you wanted to dumb it down just to that level, you could do it, and it would pretty much work the same way. So mobile first, what does that mean? It means KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. The lowest common denominator web browsers and mobile devices can't use media queries. So that, in effect, becomes your first request. So if it can't process it, what is the default? And I'll get into an example of that in a couple of minutes. So this idea comes from these guys at YIBU, and he has a great keynote that I linked to on here where he talks about basically what I said in the beginning, which is that Western culture is really adopted, or the Western industrialized countries have really adopted smart devices, and we have very, very sophisticated experience compared to a lot of the world that actually has greater cell phone adoption, but less of a technology gain. They have what we would consider not the best things on the planet. So we're going to be talking about the elements of markup, like I was talking about before, page structure. So basically, all websites break down into a few things. You've got a header, some navigation, images, you've got like a main content section, a body, you have sidebar 1, 2, 3, 7, and you usually have a footer. And HTML5 markup-wise, although I won't be talking about directly that, but the idea behind, a lot of the ideas behind HTML5 is that, since we have these consistent elements in the web delivery of information, we should have tags that represent that, so that there's no more, I have a div that's ID header. It becomes semantic. It becomes something that that the software can recognize and make use of, so that it's not just hunting around for, oh, what's the first thing on the page? I think this is a header because it has this ID. There's not that. There's no ambiguity about what that content is anymore because you're telling it exactly what it is. So what we need to do with each of the dimensions is reorganize for size. And this is just like a horrible bad example of what that would be kind of like, or what you're starting to see right now. With the skinnier devices like iPhone, Android, etc., you're going to get this more columnized view of everything. There's a degradation where you get your header, your navigation, your sidebars will snap down. Maybe you'll have a little less content. Maybe a few pictures will disappear, stuff like that. Something on a tablet, you might get a fixed right sidebar. I don't know if any of you guys look at Gawker network blogs. When I say Gawker, I hope there's there's one head shaking. Yes. Okay. So if you read IO9 or Lifehacker or any of that stuff, when you saw the big change where they're like, oh, everybody's going to have a tablet layout now. That's really convenient. It was sucky for desktop users, but tablet owners are like, oh, this is wonderful. Jerks. So they have a very different experience because their device allows them to basically look at everything like it's a book. The metaphor of the newspaper, magazine, etc. is very live in the tablet. And then you've got a representation of the desktop where you've got some more space. Your primary interactive tool is the mouse, and that becomes your way of traversing all this content. So, and pretty soon, of course, that'll disappear, and we'll just have touch interfaces everywhere. So let's jump into code. By the way, I'm sorry, I'm just like blowing right through all this stuff, so don't be afraid to go, Zach, you're blowing right through this stuff, I'm lost, or you're just talking too fast. So we're going to talk about code for a second. What is the question of what is a media query? This is a basic example of what that is. So there's two ways of including a media query in code. And one is through linking to a style sheet and adding in media equals and then give it some parameters. And in this case, in this example, I'm telling it the media type is a screen, and I want the minimum width to be 600 pixels, and after that I've got my href to the style sheet that I want. What this is saying basically is that as long as the width of the window is at a minimum 600 pixels, pull in this style sheet. So when I talk about browser-first design, I'm talking about using a cascade of minimum sized requirements. So like 0 point would be all my styles that don't have a minimum width. They're just my font faces, etc. Let's say I'm targeting iPhone. My minimum width is going to be 320, and so I'm going to change how the colors are, change text size, because reading 13-point fonts on an iPhone is excruciating. I need that to be closer to 18 or 20 because it's more comfortable. As I step up, I go to 480, then I say minimum width at 480. Override those style sheets, those styles basically. And doing it using this method will allow you to not have to necessarily overwrite existing classes or changes that you make. It allows you to just basically hot swap what the style sheets are physically. Yes?
Minimum width, is that including 480? Is it greater than or equal to?
This is, minimum width is, it would be greater than or equal to until it hits another minimum. Yeah, so, and you can do ranges also, like from and to. You can do the landscape portrait method also, and it will net the same effect. It will do the work for you of saying, in the instance of using landscape or portrait, it will go ahead and do the work for you of looking at the browser window and saying, oh, is this taller than it is? Is this taller than it is wide, or is it wider than it is tall? And then bringing the styles for that. Yes.
To clarify what you said about how they're being hot swapped, like.
Yep.
My sense would be that if you had a stack of these,
Mm-hmm.
you would have the usual cascading rules to apply.
Yes.
And so is it really being swapped, or is it mean if I have an namespace in a smaller one that doesn't get overwritten, it'll just carry on through.
Yeah, you're actually right. So it will stack on itself unless you give it a breakpoint. Like, so in this case, if I just did only minimums, then yes, absolutely. What it's going to do is just keep adding style sheets each time a new dimension is picked up. If you give it ranges, those will drop out.
So you could make it be more strategic, like what you said. If you had certain styles that applied for a certain range of sizes, you could set them at the smallest size and then override them at the highest size where they no longer apply.
Yep. So yeah, and the other way of doing this is to put it in your style sheet itself. And you basically wrap them with the @media, give it the same type of argument, and then start plugging in what you want to change. So has anybody here experimented with this at all? I don't know, we got one, a brave soul. Okay.
But after like 50 elements, it becomes
Kind of unbearable.
Go back and that landscape report.
There are ways that you can sub some of that stuff out by wrapping in things like @import. So you can separate your style sheets and then have them called so you can edit them individually instead of looking at one giant sheet. But the only crappy part about that is that those style sheets that get the @import that's inside of a media query do not get aggregated, so they won't get compressed, which is a big suck. Yeah, so we like demo. All right. Hello, cat. Okay, so there is a ton of documentation about different things that you can do with media queries, and there's a lot of different things that you'll need to think about in terms of images and text styles in general. So doing some research on the front end to figure out like average bandwidth, and there are a lot of tricks that there's actually. I'll let me back up a second. So there's the biggest boundary really for this is bandwidth. So if you're making a website that's super content rich, this may not be the best way for you to do things. If you have a ton of videos or a ton of images and you don't have a good way of detecting and swapping out to smaller formats for the littler screen sizes, you're basically going to ruinate anybody's experience who's not on a really great 3G or up connection, basically. So if you know you're building something for like UNICEF and you know it has to work in the middle of Africa where there is a bird tethering a satellite dish into the air, it's probably a good idea to not do this and actually build a mobile site. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as one tool for the job. That is unrealistic because there are so many variables with each of your clients and each of the projects that they have. But if I had a choice and I could make everybody do something one way, I would probably go the CSS route because it's very accessible, it's easy to build, and it's easy to get the results you want pretty quickly. So basically, I'm just going to scale the browser and show you different elements. As soon as I find my cursor again, there it is. All right, so this is at ground zero. This is without any media queries happening. I've got this content. There's a header, footer, an image, some navigation. It's all right. This will pass for any generic mobile browser. I've got the image scaled to the size that I want, basically. But as I scale up, you'll notice the image grows. We get some splash of color. Oh, there we go. Yes. I've got a bigger nav bar. My cat has grown in size, like it's Godzilla. The other cool thing is that the style doesn't have to just be fluid. As you hit certain ranges, you can set and say basically, oh, now that it's 1200 plus, I want it to be fixed width and keep it that way. So don't feel like, I have to unlearn this way of styling websites and designing for websites. You don't. You can actually have more fun with it. So this is actually kind of a really cool thing. Like, every device that has a browser in it can have a different experience with the exact same content. Not too shabby. So that's the basic principle that I'm just trying to get across, is that as artists, we have a great opportunity to be creative with all the different mediums. Like, if you know that there's going to be a version of it for televisions because you're building let's say a show page for something on Boxy or Roku, that's all just HTML, and it's fancy, and it's got a bunch of JavaScript behind it, but you can do something cool with it. Let's see. So how does this look on mine? What I'm doing is using the I've given it styles that are baseline, and then I'm setting a media query at different intervals to get the scale to happen. So here's one right here, at media all. So I know that not all, obviously because I know that not all web browsers have the ability to use the CSS transitions. That's how you got all the cute transitional easing and all that nonsense. As long as they can read that, I'm telling them, if you have that capability, employ it. Every time these elements shift, I want you to transition somehow. And I'm, giving them some basic info. And then I set my first query. I want there to be some padding on these 320s because I don't like it when the text hugs the side of the screen. And then when we get a little bit larger, say 600, I'm going to start adding in some new color and changing the appearance of the navigation elements because I want them to be larger and more, take up more visual space on the site. And then as we hit 900, we've got yet another set of changes. I'm going to put a sidebar on the right-hand side. And then as we hit the last set of changes, I'm going to reorganize that stuff and set a fixed width and make sure that thing just sits there in the middle. So yeah, this all leverages pre-existing styling techniques and just basically helps augment it through the media query method. And the reason I prefer using this minimum width system is, as you saw kind of in my ruddy demo, you never see a jump. There's no jumping in between or a snap from size to size to size. It kind of just spreads itself out across each iteration of the browser size. So that's kind of that's my my personal philosophy or way that I want to present things to my users. I don't want them to be I don't want them to start playing with the browser and then be like, oh, I'm breaking everything. No, I want them to be able to experience the transition and understand that, oh, okay, there's something here that I can, that I can play with, and I'm not actually doing any harm. Let me hop back to this excitement. Yeah, absolutely. I will attach it. You guys can have it. But anyways. Huh?
Picture the cat as well.
Oh, yeah. The cat, yeah. So I'll comment on that in a second. Cats. All right. So like I said before, there are some pitfalls, obviously. Bandwidth limits for image sizes is a big one. There's a statistic out that basically says that the burden of performance is now on the front-end developer. And, server-side development has gotten to a point where they can cache so many things and eliminate so much overhead that all the work that's being done is being done at the client side in the device, in the browser. So whatever you can do to minimize that workload based on which device is getting hit, and we're basically guessing based on how wide the screen is, that is now in your hands. You got to really think about how much detailed flourish, etc. you need to include. And the nice thing about having mostly CSS3 styling effects and things like that is it eliminates a ton of image overhead that you don't need for like drop shadows and gradients and text effects. And you know, if you're running into something where it's like this isn't working in all the cases that I need, then you need to work around it, drop it, or find a JS shim that is going to help you get to where you need to be. And there's plenty of them. A good place to start for stuff like this, in my opinion, is Paul Irish's HTML5 boilerplate. The HTML5 side of it is fine and everything, but the really good part is that he built in a number of things that are deliberately weighted towards mobile experience. And so he's got an actual mobile starter kit that lets you deal with, you know, if you need to swap out your navigation link items with, let's say, a drop-down that will be recognized on like iPhone, Android, etc. as, you know, the cute wheel or the option selector that pops up. Those things will be pre-packaged for you. They're vetted. I mean, there's such an awesome amount of tools available for basically technology that's not solidified. So if you think about it, we are totally treading the new ground for the next generation of devices. So you should be really excited that we have this, you know, rich library. We've been suffocating for so long on just, you know, how do I make this stuff fit on this one web page? And now we have like a tool set and a library and a bunch of people behind it. So it becomes a lot easier to prototype. Okay, so I have a bunch of knowledge vomit in here. There's links to a bunch of different demos that are amalgamed in this presentation. Obviously, I think earlier Ethan Marcotte's book on responsive web design was mentioned. It's a great book. It's awesome. The List Apart series is phenomenal. All these guys, Chris Coyier and actually I think Marcotte's original post on a list, is listed in here. So there's just a ton of things that you get to play with. Another good thing for you to take a look at if you haven't been to it is Media Query ES, and what that is a site that basically showcases web design that's done specifically using media query work. And that is not it because I'm not looking at it. There we go. So this site's really cool because they basically highlight all the people or all really awesome web designs that are employing this method of media query, you know, responsive design stuff. So if you look at one of these dandies, and we're going to get a page that looks like this, but I want to go to the site. There we go. So it'll give you a nice showcase of stuff that you can, you know, view source and rip apart and figure out, you know, how is it that they're employing all these nifty techniques. I'm a big fan of it. I think it helps everybody to have these resources available and be able to play with them. I think I'm going to get it. Yeah, there we go. Oh, that's adorable. Yeah, so like I said, this is a really cool time for us because it's a new frontier, but all the browser developers are kind of helping the artists do all of their work by giving us a cool set of tools. So yeah, I'll make sure to zip up the demo I showed you, and for the cats thing, actually, I can tell you what this is. There's a site that does URL-based image placement. And the iteration of this is, let's see, where is it? Place Kittens or something ridiculous. Yeah, it's placekitten.com. And then you just give URL, you give like a slash and then a width number and a slash and a height number, and it'll basically just dump that image with a kitten on it, which is really adorable, into your web page. So there's a lot of these cool web-based tools now that you can just kind of plop lorem images basically into your site so that people kind of get an idea of how things can happen. And as you saw from the scaling, that's all one image. I picked a giant image, pops in, and as the browser changes, it scales. And that comes from using a very specific thing that's actually in the HTML5 boilerplate that basically says all image tags have 100% width. So as it detects the screen closing in on it or whatever boundary closing in on it, it tries to fill up 100% of whatever that space is. So that's what gives it that very smooth shifting in size. That is all I have. I know it's really fast. Yes.
Are you aware of any way that you can utilize like image capture and 7-image styles to take advantage of that for what you said about optimizing?
Yeah.
I love the idea of being able to give somebody a smaller image on an iPhone.
I personally have not implemented any of them. I know there is a way. Actually, one of my cohorts, Chris Rupal at Four Kitchens, is working on a module that basically does that and allows you to hot swap images in based on whatever those dimension presets are that you want to give it.
You can do that like what you can do with bitrate swapping for video.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's ways of doing this using just plain JavaScript in the interim, but yeah, I think you'll start to see a good set of tools coming out of the Drupal community that have that. Already there's Adapt theme, which is a base theme. There's Omega. There's a small handful now of kind of fluid base themes that you can grab from D.O. I have a different presentation that I do on just theming in general. I'm kind of a neat freak, so I have my own base theme that I roll, and I tend to not like to use sub-theming unless I desperately need something from it. Just because, for me, philosophically, it takes me more time to shut stuff off from a sub-theme that is, trying to do a bunch of work for me than it does to, roll exactly what I need. A good example of something that's very at a 0 level would be DAO. That was Development Seed's base theme that they used for Rubik, which was a very nice admin theme in D6. That's now basically rolled into D7. So sorry, I'm rambling, but yeah, there's some tools out there that you can use to help you get started that are Drupal exclusive. But the nice thing about Drupal is that you can work around all of the stuff that it's going to deliver. I mean, at the end of the day, if your objective is to just plop content into the body field and hit save and have that show up, you can wrap it around anything. So there we go. Any other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, rotten fruit? No? All right. Thanks for sticking around for the end of the day.